I have the great privilege of introducing two very wonderful people, Heather Lill and Matt Horsnell. And I'm just going to give a brief introduction and they're going to take over because they've got a lot to share. So Heather is a licensed professional counselor in the state of Tennessee. She's worked in rural mental health, serving her hometown for over a decade, where she operates a small private practice, in addition to being the full-time manager of Project Sleep's Sleep Helpline Program. She serves as a county representative for the Mid-Cumberland Council for Children and Youth and is a member of the Expert Advisory Board for her regional vocational rehab program. Y'all, I could read this whole page. There's so much more you need to know about them. It's amazing. Matt is a husband, father of three, sleep advocate, living with narcolepsy with cataplexy, NT1, and an obstructive sleep apnea. As an author and advocate, he has published research on lived experience with sleep disorders. His contributions span plain language summaries, manuscripts, posters, and conference sessions. Matt also worked as a consultant for the pharmaceutical industry and on behavioral sleep projects. I've got to throw in, he also helps moderate the UNIGHT program with Hypersomnia Foundation. Go, Matt. Okay. I'm turning it over to them. Y'all enjoy.
So thank you guys so much for showing up today. Today we're going to talk with you a little bit about the impact of sleep disorders on relationships. When we were preparing for this, we actually were in a marital counseling session. We were like, are we qualified to do that? And I think the reality is we were in the perfect place to have that conversation, because relationships are hard. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but we do want to introduce kind of us. There's a lot of friendly faces in here, people that we know and who may know us and our story a little bit, but just wanted to kind of give you guys some backgrounds about who we are, which is mostly hams. So we love to go out and we love to do legislative advocacy. And that's probably been one of the greatest things that we've done together in terms of, sleep advocacy together. And then we also are best friends, which comes with all of the getting along together, spending time together, and sometimes me getting on her nerves. But we do love having fun. And that's been kind of one of the common themes. We are not only a blended family. I came with 3 kids and she graciously has accepted all of us. So we've got 2 adult teenage daughters. I guess one's 20 now, and then a 12-year-old son. So that's just a little bit of background about us. We both have our own issues and sleep disorders and things that we live with, but we're here to kind of talk with you a little bit about what's going on. Did you want to add any context? Okay. So I wanted to kind of lay out what is the challenge here. And the research is kind of bleak and dark, so I don't want to dwell on this. But when it comes to the published research that's available, both 98.4% of people with narcolepsy indicated that it made their social life harder. That number is 98% when it comes to IH. Also, in terms of marriage statistics, it's about half of the people polled in terms of a PWN study were married compared to the general population. So a fairly stark difference in terms of age-related differences in marriage and being single. And then we're not going to dwell a whole lot about this, but I thought it was an important conversation to have, or at least open up, is that this also can impact potentially sex life. And the statistics were a lot higher than I thought, but I think, again, it's important that we acknowledge it impacts relationships in all aspects. And so 81% of PWN claimed that it impacted their sex life, and that number came to be 89% impacted with people with IH. And so
after some super bleak statistics, we're actually more here to talk to you about how there is hope for having a successful and healthy relationship. This was Matt's idea, by the way. I was like, they're not going to like us after that. But we're going to move into some things that really we use in our relationship. We wanted to try to stay away from you need conflict resolution, you've got to have all of these communication. So we've kind of broken it down into our approach. Matt joked that we were going to make a bunch of Ted Lasso jokes up here. And it was going to be the Lill Horsnell way. But mostly we're going to start with the idea of honesty. And I know that all of you are thinking like, well, yeah, obviously you have to be honest with each other. And that's true. We do. We do. We have to be very honest with one another about our capacities, about what's going on in his life. He has to tell me those things. I have to tell him those things. We also really want to stress that you have to be honest with yourself about your own capacity. I can't tell him what I need if I don't know and I'm not focused in on that. He can't tell me what he needs if he's not focused in on those things and he's not aware of those things. So starting with the idea of honesty.
And building on that honesty piece too, it also comes down with honesty with expectations. And so that's that internal honesty. So what are we capable of doing on a given day? You know, that's something that we need to talk through, because if my expectations are not in line with hers, that's just setting us up for potential conflict. We'll get out, we'll be having a great time, and I'm gonna be like, all right, I'm ready to call it quits. And she may continue to want to go. Also, oftentimes it's the inverse. You know, she wants to go home and I want to continue. So again, just being open and honest and candid with each other about what those expectations are, I think, is a really important step. And then kind of moving on to balancing support. This was a fun exercise putting this together, because we got to view, I got to hear what her perspective was and she got to hear what my perspective was. And, we were talked about this after we had just got off a flight, and the idea of putting on your own oxygen mask first came up in conversation. And in terms of balancing support, my narcolepsy symptoms are the most important thing. And I'm going to pass it to her.
And my chronic illness symptoms are also the most important thing. We stole this idea. I read a quote a really long time ago that says, everybody in the world believes they have the best dog and nobody is wrong. And it's the same thing, okay? It is the idea that my symptoms are the most important thing, but also his symptoms are the most important thing. And so we have to figure out ways to balance when I need support and when he needs support.
Sometimes it's easy. Like when we're both navigating our symptoms well, that's an easy time. We're cruising. I mean, there's life will happen and their hiccups will occur, but it's not hard. If she's struggling and I'm doing well, we can do it. We can navigate those curves in the road. Vice versa. If I'm struggling and she's doing well, she can pick up the slack and help push forward a little bit. When we're both doing crappy, that's when it becomes challenging. And that's when we really need to be, again, going back to that honesty and candid part. Like, we have to talk through those issues, even when we don't want to, or even when I don't necessarily want to hear what's going on or how hard it is, because I'm having a hard time too. But just stopping and pausing and like taking a moment to listen, I think has been a really big help. Moving in with Heather and blending the family, I've learned so much about being a parent from her. So again, bringing it back to the family, we have dinner about 3 to 5 times per night, or per week rather, per night. Whew. That's when I lost your way. Yeah, you know what? Lots of meals. Yeah, big day. Yeah. But the idea that we're having family dinner and we're sitting down and we're not just, the kids are not plugged in on their phones watching away. We're actually having conversation and we're listening to what's going on with one another. And that was a really important step in terms of that honesty piece and also hearing one another. I don't know, you guys who know me well know this is true. I love to talk. Sometimes it's harder for me to listen. And don't laugh that hard, okay? But
we balance that out really well because I'm a great listener and I don't like to talk that much.
But it's important for me to listen. And we have to process through things together. And when we were preparing this session, the concern was that it was going to be Matt makes jokes, Heather corrects Matt's jokes and whatnot. But she's actually funnier than I am. True story. But the idea that, again, that we had that conversation beforehand, putting this together was actually a challenge. I'm not gonna lie. Sitting down, what do we have to offer, a group of people who are looking to find a relationship, and then being open and honest and sharing that, like, it's not easy. It's not easy. We mess up, and again, we can come up and we can tell you all of the things that we do well, but we're also willing to talk about all of those things that we don't do well. And so I think the question and answer piece is going to be a huge piece of this presentation. And I don't know, for those of you who watched Ted Lasso, at the end of the last season, it's called The Lasso Way, and they're coming up with, like, I think it's the 4, pieces of Lasso Way, and then the 4th one was kind of a to be decided. And so as we were putting this together, we were like, well, there's so many things that we could add. And so you guys are going to kind of help us figure out what that last piece is. When I had some ideas of what I thought it was going to be, she had some ideas of what she thought it was going to be. I personally think it's friendship and compatibility, but I'll let you guys decide.
I kind of think it's humor. But here we are. So I think that brings us to what we really wanted to do was more of that Q&A. What do you guys want to know about relationships? What information do you need? What tips, what tricks? What can we teach you? Or show you or tell you how we have solved? Do you have scenarios where you're like, we don't know how to handle this in our household? How do you guys do it in yours? You tell us what you need, and that's what we kind of wanted to spend the bulk of our session doing.
I also wanted to demystify the idea of having kids when you have a central disorder of hypersomnolence. I had my two oldest daughters before I knew I had narcolepsy, and I do wonder, would I have chosen to have kids if I knew ahead of time? And so just wanted to open that up because, to be honest, being a parent is the greatest thing and the greatest gift that I can possibly give this world. And even though it is incredibly hard and incredibly challenging to raise, you know, not just one, but three kids. It's my reason for waking up in the morning. It's actually so much easier to get out of bed for them than it is to get out of bed for me. So just wanted to kind of open up because I know there's a lot of people who would make great parents. We're probably on the fence about whether or not should I bring a kid into this world. And we can't make that decision for you, but we're happy to talk through what are some of those apprehensions and concerns that you may have.
With children, from the cognitive model of having somebody, I have IH, have had it since I was 18, but I'm also a scientist. So I have built my entire career in life around exploring, navigating, trying to understand how to identify these disorders, but also how to best treat them. So I'm like kind of on both sides, right? But I am a patient, right? And then I can absolutely empathize with all the things, all the IH and some of the narcolepsy things too. One of the biggest challenges for me was swallowing the pill, if you will, of being told it might not be the best idea to have children. And yep. And I wanted to scream at that person. It was a physician, but they were just being honest from their place, right? I've also heard from so many patients that they are terrified to even think that they would want to have or could. It comes down to could. It's if you want, yes, but you think you can't. That's where my heart breaks.
Yeah.
Because I did it. It wasn't easy, but it was singularly the most powerful thing in my life that I have ever done. And now I'm a single mommy of two precious kids. And it's not easy at all. But I want to open it up for dialogue because if there is anybody in this room that has friends or yourself with that, kind of that impasse in your mind that this is not a possibility, don't necessarily, this is my own biased opinion, right? Don't necessarily take it completely off the table without, right, critically evaluating who you are, your zeitgeist, your support team, everything. Okay.
Oh, great point. Jane?
Said because I actually just turned 43 last week and I'm 22 weeks pregnant. I've been diagnosed with narcolepsy since 2010 and I was really on the fence. I was like, I don't even know if I want to have kids, but the one thing that I found is it is doable, but I will talk. So the finding the peer support, I think, is one of the hardest things because if I told you about my last 10 years of dating life with narcolepsy, Rachel and I were just talking like, when's the time do you tell them that you have narcolepsy? I'm like, the night that they spend the night and you take your sodium oxybate. That's when you tell them. But I would say, for anyone that has that mindset, all of our support groups here are to help empower people because we can do a lot more than what a lot of people, because you get the limitations and then sometimes it's all you stare at. And so, that's why I love hearing about your guys' relationship
Yeah.
because
Yeah, well, and thank you for that, Jane. And the decision on when to tell a partner, honestly, online dating was the scariest thing I've ever done. And again, I've had teenage daughters. Like the idea of trusting another adult with the fact that I've got a chronic neurological disorder. Oh, by the way, I'm also really poor. And as a single dad of 3, I wasn't exactly like checking all the boxes, but and there was plenty of times when I would go on a few dates and then, I'd be, so I have narcolepsy, and then the phone just wouldn't pick up on the other end anymore. But finding a partner who supported me was, and who I chose to open up, we took it slow in terms of talking, and actually shared an article I wrote about narcolepsy, and she inquired, well, tell me about your blogging. And I was like, okay, I'll let you read it. And then the whole time, I'll let her tell the rest of the story, but the whole time I was worried, like, okay, well, this was fun. We had a nice few dates, but it'll be over.
We hadn't even met like in person yet, actually. But he was doing primarily writing and volunteer work. And so I asked about what the writing was. What do you write about? And he sent me an article, and my stepsister also has type 1 narcolepsy. And it was the first time in my life that I had met another person with the diagnosis. And I went, oh, wait a minute. I know what that is. You have that? And he was like, you know what that is. So I do think that helped. It also helped knowing that he was potentially gaining a partner who also had chronic illness struggles of their own, sleep issues of their own. So I did have that kind of basis for understanding that life doesn't always give you like, the rainbows and the butterflies and the kittens. Sometimes you do get the lemons and you have to go, well, let's figure out how to make lemonade. And I think that's kind of what we have figured out how to do, is balance my symptoms and his symptoms, how to balance parenting with all of these issues. Alyssa, in response to your question, I personally didn't have any children. I have 3, obviously, through Matt. But I think that's where that honesty piece comes in. You have to get really, really honest with yourself about whether or not you think parenting is a thing that you can handle. Personally, again, it was not a thing that I felt equipped to do physically. I was like, but I loved the idea of parenting outside of that. And so I did the instant family package. I got the best of all of it. I still got to experience a lot of firsts with our kids, but I didn't have to do the part that terrified me. So there are other ways to parent too. So that's something to take into account. There is not just one way to become a parent. And I'm saying that up here as a stepmother who was adopted by a step parent, so there are plenty of ways to parent. So maybe creating a biological child of your own is not something that your body can physically handle or that you can physically do. But there are definitely other ways to become a parent and other ways to do that. So that's not the only option. So I want you guys to keep that one in mind as you are thinking through what your life decisions look like and deciding what's best for you.
Oh, okay. Tara, I see your hand up.
So, as someone who's very independent and has been single and by myself for years, like ever since I was diagnosed and even before, how or what do you recommend, or how do you go about like letting someone in and like not being all like, I'm not tired, I'm perfectly fine, and not actually like showing how I'm actually feeling, like I'm acting like everything's fine just because I've always done that. And that makes sense.
So no, it makes so much sense. And when do you disclose how hard it can be is a big struggle. Ultimately, if I disclosed to Heather how hard it was and she couldn't absorb that, then that probably would have meant that we were not supposed to be together. And that's a hard thing to say, but she was able to accept that and receive that. So if you're having trouble opening up, possibly explore the why with, a therapist, talk through some of that. But if the other person can't receive that, you may want to say, okay, you have a nice day. That's not the right choice for me.
I also think too, balancing that out with, am I just saying, okay, cool, you can't handle me, get away from me because I want that independence? And to that, I would just say as a therapist, hyperindependence can be a trauma response, and you might want to explore that with someone. And I don't mean that like I'm going to call you all the way out. That might be something to very gently explore with another person. What is it about me that says I just want to be independent and I don't want people to know how bad this is? If I had to guess, I would say there's probably some shame attached to it. Right? Which is the thing that comes up a lot when we have conversations, particularly about narcolepsy and IH. These are things that people don't hear about, they don't know about. There are all of the misrepresentations in the media, all of those things. And so it is a thing that can be very shame-based. And so I would definitely recommend exploring that. One of the best things that we have done is we both have our own individual counselors. We've added a marital therapist. We have lots and lots of time to talk about our feelings. And it works really well. It helps us balance all of those things out.
Also, acknowledging that you're struggling isn't a weakness. And I think that was something that took me a long time to get in my head, and acknowledge that I'm struggling is a strength. It's me saying, no, I'm not doing well right now. And just to own it, it also takes some of the power away from it. But I definitely second what Heather was talking about. One-on-one talk therapy has been tremendous for me working through my own stuff. And again, I can speak to what a not great relationship looks like. That's me very sugarcoating it. But with the kid's biological mom, sometimes it doesn't work out. And knowing when to step away, and then also knowing how to process that usually takes a professional. I saw a hand right over here. Okay.
Hi, I just wanted to bring us back around to the parenting conversation. And I feel, maybe I'm speaking for myself, of course, but maybe others have felt this way, that as women, there's a lot of pressure from society or from our families or from our friends to have biological children or to raise children. And for me personally, I can't get pregnant. I don't have a uterus. That was a whole thing. And I'm okay with that. And so when I met my husband, that was a conversation I had to have about, hey, I can't biologically have kids. I'm open to adopting. Are you cool with that? He was cool with that. We're married. Everything's great. And then I get diagnosed with narcolepsy. And, I was like, I don't think, at least as, the medications stand as of now, I don't feel comfortable raising babies, like I'm going to have cataplexy and drop them on their head. Like that scares the shit out of me. And so that was a conversation I had with him about like, okay, what if we can't, have our own children or raise children? Is that okay? Do you still want to be married to me? And he was like, yeah, you're pretty cool. We'll be fine. We'll figure it out. But so I want to validate that, like, if you don't want to have kids just because you don't want to have kids, that is fine. If you don't want to have kids because you don't think you can handle it with, the medications that you're on right now, or it makes you like, that's okay. I love being the fun aunt. And because I don't have kids, I can put all of my extra time, money, and energy into my friends' kids, and they think I'm the coolest. And we're very okay with that, and I feel like, whatever decision you make when it comes to children or what your family looks like you get to decide for yourself. We've been doing the last few Christmases with my friends and their kids. And so I still get to do the like fun Christmas morning with the kids, even though they're not mine, they're still mine, And I just want to validate, like, it's okay if your family system looks a little bit different than the nuclear family and what people expect of you. Like you get to decide that for yourself and what you find fulfilling.
Yeah, I want to speak to that point. Matt and I discussed whether or not we were going to have one of those magical us babies, after we got married, one of those you have yours and then we have one that's ours. They all moved in with me. And I went from being a single person to a mom of 3 overnight. And I went, absolutely not. No, this is good enough for me. And that was a decision that I got to make on my own for my own reasons. And I was perfectly fine when it then did come time for me to like have to go through medical procedures to have a hysterectomy and all of those things. I was sailed right through that with no, I am solid in that this is good enough. So you're absolutely right. There are other ways to define family, and there are other places to put that. I think we had a question right here. Oh, you've got a mic, Taylor. Can we get to you right after? Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Wow, I just blanked for a second. Oh, I have a question about dates. Taking a few steps back from the parenting before we get to that point. For me personally, I find that like a dinner date is not my thing. Sitting in a quiet, dimly lit room is just a little too sleepy to enjoy a connection. Similar with movies. So like what kind of dates were were enjoyable and like worked well for you guys?
So our first date, we went and we collected fossils, and we went on a hike. Which, for those of you who know that I love invertebrate fossils, particularly from Tennessee. But we went outside and we did active activities because that was something I needed to stay present. It's also, you know, it's low pressure in terms of, you know, a spend the night situation. You know, we're out, it was public. But so outdoor activities were a lot of fun. And I think, again, we don't go to a lot of movie dates. I like sci-fi, she likes romance movies, so doesn't always overlap. But the reality is I might fall asleep in the movie anyway.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
To bounce off of that, because that was part of my question, do you guys mind sharing what some of the, like, your low energy dates are? Like, if you're having a flare, you know?
So recently we have been doing a lot of puzzles together. That's more of a me activity. That's the other part, is we kind of balance out whose activities we like to do. We do a lot of that. We watch a lot of Ted Lasso, Grey's Anatomy. Like it's my comfort show, okay? A lot of TV dates. We've got a projector, so we'll set that up like in the yard and wait till the sun goes down. Both of us being space nerds, we like watching meteor showers, or just kind of laying in our front yard. We do live in an area where it is dark, so we are able to see the stars. So those are things that we like to do. Board games. I've got several that are relationship focused. There's one called We're Not Really Strangers that has a couples edition where you kind of take turns on levels, asking questions and getting to know each other, and connecting in that way. So some of those things make really, really great low energy dates. Our favorite thing most recently, besides puzzles, is what we call apps night. We just buy a bunch of frozen processed apps, like potato skins and cheese sticks, appetizers, and we just cook a bunch of those and we sit in front of the TV and we binge whatever TV show we want to watch, and that's the end of that. And there's not as much pressure in that way for things to be, again, we're both pretty low energy a lot of the time, and because we're balancing two separate sets of chronic illnesses. So having low energy things that we like to do really helps.
I think we're actually wrapping up on time. So just wanted to thank you guys. And if you guys think of that third thing, that's the most important thing, whatever you take away. It really wasn't anything, like we just threw it out there. So we didn't have one. So nice little placeholder. But thank you guys so much for coming. And if you have any questions, we're happy to answer.